So we'll go ahead and dive right in. So we're going to get into this story about Jim Clyburn, Cory Booker, and Jasmine Crockett. So these three individuals did not have a good week because they have said some things that have really rubbed people the wrong way, whether it was in reference to Israel and Palestine, or whether it is in reference to people not wanting to vote for Joe Biden. And I think this is really important for people to hear, because oftentimes we talk about what it's like to have representation. But just because you have representation, that doesn't mean those people are actually representing you the way that they should. And with these three individuals, that is definitely the case. You have to understand where Jim Clyburn comes from, what he is doing. You have to understand where Jasmine comes from and what she is doing. And you have to understand where Cory Booker comes from and what he is doing. So first and foremost, we're going to get started with this interview from Jasmine Crockett, where apparently she doesn't seem to think that Black voters are intelligent enough to realize how Congress works and what we have received from Joe Biden. And this did not go well for Jasmine. A lot of people did not like this video. Let's dive right in.
Here's the deal. Perception is reality. And so when you look at the data that was provided in this poll, it talks about how people feel. And when people decide whether they're going to the poll or whether they're not going to the poll, it's all about how you feel in that moment. And so while the facts may not align with their feelings are dictating their reality. Their reality is that they said that they feel better or they felt better when Trump was in office. But we've been trying to push back. We've got some very popular African-American artists that are out here.
Let's just pause right here before we get to the rest of it. Before she gets into the African-American artists, I want you to notice what she's doing here. Listen to this.
Their reality is that they said that they feel better or they felt better when Trump was in office. But we've been trying to push back. We've got some very...
Pause. That part right there. She said the reality is people are telling the Democrats that they actually felt better when Trump was in office. Now, when people are saying that, it's mainly about economic issues. Economically, a lot of you were doing better under Trump's presidency than you are now under Joe Biden's presidency. And there are different reasons for that. Inflation, obviously. We have two international conflicts abroad. Let's not forget about that. The housing crisis has increased. So the homelessness rate has increased. So a lot of that focus is on the economic issues. But did you notice what she just did? After hearing voters tell her that they were doing better under Donald Trump, again, this is economically, her response is, we have been trying to push back on that. How do you push back on someone's feelings? How do you push back on someone's economic situation? How do you if somebody looks at their bank account and they see that obviously there have been some issues this year, last year, under this presidency versus under Donald Trump's presidency, how do you push back on that unless you're telling them that they're not telling the truth? So essentially, she thinks that people are not being honest about their economic situation. Let's continue. She hasn't even got to the cringe part yet.
Popular African-American artists that are out here saying things like, oh, I got checks when Trump was in office. I want those checks again, not understanding that that really came from Congress.
Pause. This piece right here. So the checks that she's referring to are those stimulus checks, right? Like we did get more money under Donald Trump than we did under Joe Biden. And she goes on to say that those checks come from Congress and people don't understand that. Let's take that point. Congress passes the legislation, the checks come from Congress. Then why is it that under Joe Biden's presidency, when Joe Biden had the House, okay, the Democrats had the House. They don't anymore, but they did. See, Joe Biden did the same thing as Obama. When Obama first entered the House, remember Obama had Democrat House. Some people say a Democrat Senate if you count Lieberman, but technically he had 2 years to work with that Dem majority. Joe Biden had 2 years to work with that Dem majority. So when she tells you, not realizing that Congress actually are the ones that put those checks through, then the question that you should come back to Jasmine with is, then why is it that the Democrats who had the majority in the House, and you can also say they were split even in the Senate, why is it that they didn't push those things through? Why does that stimulus check from Joe Biden, which he promised people $2,000, why didn't that go through? That's all on Joe Biden. That's not because of Congress. He was the one who changed the amount after the fact and said, well, you already got that extra portion from Donald Trump. That was not the way he sold that to the American people, particularly the voters in Georgia, where he said, if you put Warnock and Ossoff into office, I'll make sure you get those $2,000 checks. That was all on Joe Biden misleading the American people. Congress had nothing to do with that. So let's just remove that one from the table. But listen to what she said. Why did Joe Biden work with that Dem majority that he had the first 2 years that he was in office? Obama played this game. This is what they do. And I told you this would happen. They would lose the House. I was wrong about the red wave, but I was right about them losing the House. They would lose the House, and then they would use the excuse that they could not get those things done because Republicans had the majority in the House. Obama did the same thing. Now, this is where she really plucks people's nerves.
Understanding that really came from Congress. So we've got a couple of things, the perception issue, and then we also have an issue as it relates to civics in this country and people not understanding exactly how any of this works. Here's the deal.
So here's Jasmine Sullivan basically explaining that particularly Black voters don't understand how civics works. Jasmine is a lawyer, by the way. Just keep that in mind. She's a lawyer. You see, this is what RBN means when we talk about the Black Miss Leadership class. That was a cringe thing to say. Rather, she was right about the first part about people making their decision when they get in line to vote and yada, yada. You know, that just kind of lost all perspective when she started to discuss how Black people are not intelligent enough basically to understand how these things work. Well, let me tell you something, Jasmine. Here's something that everybody understands in this country, and that's their bank account. And they don't have to be a lawyer to look at their bank account and to see that something isn't right. They don't have to be a lawyer to walk into the grocery store and to realize that these grocery prices are a lot higher than they were 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So this statement from Jasmine did not go over well on Twitter. People were really not feeling what she said. I'm telling you. Look at the comments. Let me put this up here. I am Richie Eyes says these type of Black people have been in the way far too long. Dr. Deborah Jenkins. So I suppose she's going to educate us. Now, I tried to look up Jasmine's funding to see who her donors were, but her information isn't posted yet on Open Secrets because she's new. She's new. She's just a newbie in Congress. But even when she was running for office, I said, this woman, again, is another one pretending to be progressive, running on, don't you want another Black person in Congress? And I knew she would be just like all the others that we already have there, the Black Miss Leadership class. So here we go. We got someone from Congress, a Democrat, who apparently doesn't think that Black voters You see that look on her face? Apparently doesn't think that black voters are intelligent enough to know what we're doing. I'll let you know when the funding is posted. So that's Jasmine. Watch out for her, because she's going to be one of those ones that, again, she'll follow in the footsteps of a Maxine Waters, another one who pretended to be like she was progressive or whatever. She'll follow in those footsteps. They don't represent us. This is the thing I want people to understand. They don't represent us. This is the illusion of representation, to make us think that we have someone in there fighting for us, but we really don't. How can you sit there, Jasmine, and tell people after everything that has happened over the past 3 years that the American people should just shut up, basically, and support Joe Biden anyway, especially black voters, because we're not intelligent enough to understand how civics works? Black Miss Leadership class. Then we go on to Cory Booker. Cory Booker also not having a good week. Cory Booker was given a speech in New Jersey and was confronted by protesters. Let's go ahead and get into this one. This is funny. Tariq shared this. He said, breaking, Cory Booker's speech in New Jersey was just shut down by protesters who interrupted him after a few seconds demanding a ceasefire in Gaza, where a Palestinian child is being killed every 10 minutes. Booker was taken by surprise and had to exit immediately. I'm going to play this, and then there's some things I got to tell you about Cory Booker, because I actually did meet Cory Booker. So listen to this.
I want to call out to everybody right now. These final hours, this is what's on the ballot. We should know in New Jersey how privileged we are. There are so many places in our country right now where people want to make sure that we have. This is what makes America great.
So what's happening right now is there are protesters in the crowd, and they're holding up their hands and to show blood on their hands, and they're saying ceasefire now. Now, listen to what Cory Booker says. He's so fake.
This is what makes America great. The power to protest. The power to have free speech. The power of America.
So you see what let me show you what he does. Watch this. So obviously he wasn't expecting this to happen.
The power to protest. The power to have free speech.
So there's Cory Booker saying, this is what makes America great. The power to protest, the power to have free speech. Cory Booker is incredibly fake, incredibly fake. And I'm pretty sure, you see his eyes are like, this is what makes America great. Very fake. I met Cory Booker when he was running for president in 2020. And even during the speech that he gave in New Hampshire, he was very fake. So at that time, I had a goal to go to every rally in New Hampshire. I didn't make it to half of them because of winter storms, but I made it. That was one of the ones I made it to. There was a gentleman in the crowd that said, you know what? You remind me a lot of Barack Obama. When he came here, he said all the things that you're saying right now. And then we voted for him. He got into the White House and he abandoned the working class people. Now, how can I still remember that? I still remember what that guy said till this day, because when he said that, the entire room became silent. No one argued against that guy. No one told him to be quiet. Cory Booker kind of just froze. And I'll get into something else about that statement from that guy in just a second. But watch this.
The power of America.
I have to mute it because of the music. But you'll see there he is right there.
Column A, all the way. Column A, all the way. Column A, all the way. I want to call.
So that's Cory Booker. Eric said low rent Obama. I don't know what to say, but there's Cory Booker there. So apparently he ended up exiting because of the protesters there. Now, let me tell you something about Cory Booker. When that gentleman said, "You remind me of Barack Obama," let me point out a couple of things. Cory Booker went to an Ivy League university like Barack Obama. Cory Booker has his sob story of what it was like growing up Black in America like Barack Obama. Cory Booker tells that same story all the time. My family tried to buy a house and that we get it. Cory Booker, like Barack Obama, moved into the inner city to supposedly help out people in the inner city. For a lot of people who don't know, that's what Cory Booker did. He moved into Newark, New Jersey with the goal. At that time, I believe he was running for mayor, and his goal was to help the lower class people. And he lived there with them, lived in the building. This is why some people thought he was legit, because he didn't live in like some high-rise apartment. He lived in that community in the same building as a lot of the people that he was trying to help. So we've seen this before. We've seen the Ivy League politician, the Black Ivy League politician that moves into the hood and says they're trying to help out the lower income people. And we've also seen those politicians sell out to Wall Street, the military industrial complex, and honestly, sell out the Black community. I don't understand why Cory Booker is still being elected, why people still vote for him. Cory Booker, someone who said he fought so much for criminal justice, was one of the first people to stand up and cheer when the Democratic Party under Joe Biden agreed to fund the police more. These people are frauds. This is exactly what the donorship class wants. They want someone like a Cory Booker or a Barack Obama, someone who's Black, highly educated, went to an Ivy League school, but then they move into these lower income neighborhoods to convince the poor folk that they actually really do care about those people and their needs. And then the moment when they get their calling, and they all do, they go off to DC and they forget about those people. They take the money from big donors and they start a career in politics. This is actually a smart scheme by the donor class, because now you have the representation. Yes, they went to an Ivy League school, but they're living in the lower income community like you are. So you believe it. Cory Booker also failing on this issue in reference to Israel and Palestine. The activists are not with Cory Booker. Look at this. Indigenous activists are now blocking the weapons shipment to Israel from leaving the Tacoma port from the water. The boat is still unable to leave the port. So this happened in Washington State. Look at this video. So these are the activists.
Free Palestine. Woo, we out here.
So Breakthrough News caught this. These are the activists. We saw activists block one of the ports in Oakland, California. These activists are blocking a port in Tacoma, Washington. So this is the thing, like Cory Booker, they're not with you. And of course, people are saying, amazing. Not all heroes wear capes. Heroes, you will be remembered. So huge, because it says the boat was still unable to leave the port, similar to what happened in Oakland, California as well. And it's not just that particular action. Boeing, after shutting down Boeing Defense Building 598 for 2 hours, workers are being sent home and deliveries for the day have been canceled. Congress won't stop the bombs, so we will. And here are the activists here outside of Boeing.
How many kids have you killed today? Boeing, Boeing, what do you say? Boeing, Boeing, what do you say? How many kids have you killed today? How many kids have you killed today? How many kids have you killed today?
And you notice, like, it's not even like a lot of people, but it was enough to disrupt production and shipment for Boeing. So, and Cory Booker knows this. The people, particularly the younger people, they're not with you on this issue. Not with you on this issue. Now, there's more. So we talked about Jasmine and we talked about Cory. Now we need to get into Jim Clyburn. Jim Clyburn, who lives in one of the poorest districts in South Carolina. But Jim's not poor, right? Jim Clyburn, for years, has continued to sell out the Black community. For years. For years. Now, he's in this interview that I'm going to show you. Now, he claims that he doesn't understand why Joe Biden has the poll numbers that he has. I'll explain to you why he does not understand. So shout out to Case Study QB for this. Representative Jim Clyburn asked about the decrease in Black voters' approval in the latest polls in South Carolina. So this is important. This is in his state. And why is this important, guys? Because the Democratic Party decided to make South Carolina the first primary state for early voting instead of Iowa. This may be starting to backfire. Listen to this.
Let's talk about voters in South Carolina, your constituents there, and the comparison from 2020, the exit polls that we have, versus the latest polling on the job approval. There's a pretty big disparity there. Exit polls show in 2020, President Biden won 90% of Black votes in South Carolina. His job approval in a CNN poll out this week is now at 63%.
Look at those numbers, guys. The numbers don't lie. 2020 exit polls, Black support for President Biden in South Carolina, 90%. Now, 63%. I didn't make up these numbers. I went to college in South Carolina. I have some family members in South Carolina, and I can tell you this is not good, not just for Joe Biden, but also for Jim Clyburn, because this makes Jim look bad. Because Jim Clyburn was the one who told voters in South Carolina that Joe has your back, so you need to have his back. We're going to go out there and we're going to vote for Joe Biden. So Clyburn has some things to answer for. Let's continue.
Among Black voters. I don't know that anybody expects him to win the state in the general, but what's your assessment of this drop off in approval or support for the president among Black voters?
Well, Victor, I have been puzzled by all of this polling because I do a lot of polling. You mentioned Mississippi earlier. I spent the weekend before last 2, maybe 3 days in Mississippi. I've been in other states as well.
He's troubled by the polling because the polling doesn't reflect what he wants to see, because the polling isn't positive for Joe Biden. But he's not troubled by the polling when the polling is positive for Joe Biden. So think about that for a second and look at these numbers. Approve of Biden's job as president. 63% Black voters, 24% white voters. Listen to the rest. So we talked about Mississippi. Unfortunately, this is not about Mississippi, Clyburn. This is about your home state of South Carolina.
2, maybe 3 days in Mississippi. I've been in other states as well. On my way to Virginia on Sunday, tomorrow, or Monday. And I'm not getting that. I go throughout South Carolina all the time. Last weekend, I was in Charleston, in Columbia, in Orangeburg. I'm not getting that. So
Pause. Let me explain to you why he's not getting that. There's one or two things. One, he's either lying, because I've seen videos of Black residents of South Carolina confronting Jim Clyburn about Joe Biden's position. I played them on this show. Or two, he's talking to the wrong people. You see, Jim Clyburn, he's not even like one of the most popular congressmen in DC, but he's popular in South Carolina. So what people have to understand is that Jim Clyburn not only has a hold within certain Black communities, but in particular, the Black church and the Black fraternities. Those are the people that he's talking to. Jim Clyburn, for the most part, is talking to people that are like him, the Black bourgeoisie. He's not talking to working class Black people. He's not talking to poor Black people. And he's not talking to young Black people. And when young Black people have approached him about how they're not doing well economically, he shouted them down and said, "Get out of here with that foolishness." I played the video on the show. He's not talking to those people. He's talking to the people that already agree with him. That's part of the problem. And you have to understand the reason why someone like Jim Clyburn continues to get elected, even though he's in one of the poorest districts in South Carolina, is because of those two categories I just told you about, the Black church and the Black fraternities. Jim Clyburn has probably every Black pastor in South Carolina. He probably has their numbers. He probably has some type of relationship with them, whether it's on a business basis or some type of philanthropy basis. Like, he has those people on speed dial. Same thing with the fraternal organizations. And this is really who he relies on to come through, not just for him, but for the Democratic Party. Thank you, Ashura. Yes. Sabby Sabs, he's definitely, if not Boulay adjacent. Yes. These are the people that he likes to congregate with. He's not talking to the black people that are working two jobs. Is he talking to Black people that have to do a shift at McDonald's in the morning and then another shift at the grocery store in the evening? Is he talking to those people? No. He's talking to bougie Black people, particularly in those two groups that I just told you about. Let's continue.
I don't know what's going on with this polling, but I guarantee you.
What are you getting?
I'm getting that African Americans are very pleased with this president and what he has done. We know how we are connecting every home and every business in South Carolina to the internet. We know that it's because of this infrastructure bill that he did. We know that seniors are now paying much less for their medicine, most especially for the negotiations going on with Medicare, the cap with $35 a month for insulin. We know.
Let me pause for a second. The two examples that he just gave, bad examples. He's talking about the benefit that seniors received in reference to, Medicare, the Medicare legislation that Joe Biden passed. Here's the problem with that. That only benefits seniors. Last time I checked, it's not just seniors in South Carolina. So that's one. Two, he mentions infrastructure bill. He's like, well, we know that Black people in South Carolina are now connected to the internet. What does that matter if you can't put food on the table? Do you see the problem? Do you guys know there are parts of South Carolina? Because when I went to college, South Carolina, University of South Carolina is in Columbia. So Columbia is kind of what they refer to as the city, even though it's suburban, whatever. Anywho, do you know that there are parts of South Carolina, like rural South Carolina, that you go to and like there's barely any internet? People live there. Barely any internet. We're talking about people need broadband. There's towns that don't have grocery stores, so you have food deserts. Now, what's more important, food? Let him continue. Terrible, terrible take.
For their medicine, most especially for the negotiations going on with Medicare, the cap with $35 a month for insulin. We know who is responsible for all of that.
Well, Congressman, so let me just jump in here because one more thing I want to bring to you. And, nobody's going to challenge your connection to the people of South Carolina and Mississippi as you're going over there to help the Democratic candidate run for governor. But we've got a scientific poll that shows that there's been this drop off. And also, our John King was in Milwaukee this week speaking with black voters there. I want you to listen to what they say, as of course we know Wisconsin is crucial if the president is to be reelected.
Black people in general, I think, tend to be pretty loyal to the Democratic Party. And sometimes I wonder, just based on how that party has performed thus far for people of color, if we should continue to be.
If you're Joe Biden and you want to be reelected, he'd have a problem today, right?
Yes, he will. He'll have a big problem.
If it were just Biden and Trump, who would you vote for?
That's just a tough one.
So hearing that, is your suggestion that the president does not need to change what he's doing if you have these black voters who seem to be underwhelmed?
I don't think the president needs to change what he's doing. I think that those of us who are helping to run this campaign need to change what we're doing.
So you see that right there? Jim Clyburn doesn't think that Joe Biden needs to change what he's doing. People are hurting in this country financially, economically. People are struggling. But Jim Clyburn doesn't think that Joe Biden needs to change anything that he's doing. This is the same guy who would sit here and tell you that he's progressive. He's a member of the Progressive Caucus. He's a member of the Black Caucus. He's a part of the Black Miss Leadership class. Don't push for nothing no more. Just because let me make something very clear, Jim. Just because you may have participated in a couple of marches back in the day doesn't mean that you still hold those values today, especially now that you got money. And we're going to get into some of the money, some of the donor money that Jim Clyburn has. That don't mean anything today. You're comfortable now, Jim. Now he's all about himself and collecting that bag. Joe Biden doesn't need to do anything. Jim Clyburn is going to sit here and say what he needs to say to keep the positions that he has in Congress, and so that no super PACs come up against him to try to push him out of his seat. That's how this works. Yes, Denise, just like John Lewis. Just because and I got to be clear, and I hope people don't take this the wrong way. But just because you participated in a couple of marches back in the day, if you not still fighting that fight now, and I ain't got to say you don't always have to march. Some people physically can't do it. But if you're not still fighting for oppressed people now, and you sold out to Wall Street and the military industrial complex and big pharma, you don't get to brag about that anymore. That's just how it is. Jim Clyburn has been counting on black boomers to continue to support the Democratic Party. But here's what's happening. Eventually, black boomers are no longer boomers. Eventually, people do die. And then you have the younger people. You have Gen X. You have millennials. You have Gen Z. What about everybody else? What about the rest of all those groups who are not with you, not in agreement with you? The Democratic Party is not ready for this change. The Democratic Party is not ready for these other generations coming through because they're not buying this mess. Let me let them finish here.
That's what the problem is. We are not making these connections. You cannot ask for a more productive presidency than Joe Biden has had. You can go through all of the bills that he's passed. Nothing has come close to it since the Great Society programs of Lyndon Baines Johnson.
So it's the voters' fault for not understanding. Again, this goes back to what Jasmine was saying. It's the voters' fault. They just don't understand. They're not smart enough. They're not smart enough. And let's talk about Lyndon B. Let me let him finish. Hold on. Because we're going to get to something in a second.
These passed. Nothing has come close to it since the Great Society programs of Lyndon Baines Johnson. So the question is, how do we get people to understand it and to feel it? That's the problem. It's not Joe Biden's problem. It is our problem. Those of us who must get this message out and get him connected to the voters. That's the problem, not the president.
All right.
Him and Jasmine, they don't think that the American people, particularly black voters, because that's what this conversation is about in this interview, are intelligent enough to understand what's happening in their bank account, what's happening with their wallet. He's another one that needs to retire, Jim Clyburn. He's there to maintain the status quo. Now, I want to go to this video here. This is Caitlin Collins, because I want to give you a different perspective on this, and then we're going to get back into Jim Clyburn's money in a minute. In this particular interview with Max Boot and Caitlin Collins, they talk about the recent pro-Palestinian protests outside the White House. Listen to this. This is why I'm trying to tell you the Democratic Party is not on the same page with the younger generations. And they can continue to say that young people don't really show up to vote like that, but the young people don't remain to be young people. People do age. And they're not on the same page with what these groups want and need in this country. Listen to this. This is what Clyburn doesn't seem to understand.
The effects of this are being felt in Washington. I mean, the pressure on the administration to figure out something here is growing. They're facing all these calls from world leaders to find a way to get a ceasefire, humanitarian pause, tactical pause, whatever you want to call it. I mean, look at over the weekend, you can see these pictures that happened. There were protesters, pro-Palestinian protesters outside the White House. This is paint, I should note, but this is something that they were removing from outside the White House today, as all of these protesters were there, making very clear their feelings on this with this red graffiti. I covered the White House for several years. There were always protesters out there. I don't know if I've ever seen anything like this, though.
Yeah, and I think it actually may relate to your previous segment, because you were talking about why is President Biden looking suddenly weak against Trump? And part of it is he's lost support among young voters. And I think part of that may be attributed to this, the fact that a lot of younger progressives are more pro-Palestinian rather than pro-Israel. And so Biden is getting a lot of blowback from his own party for basically standing with Israel. And so you're seeing the political pressures at home as well as in the region.
Yeah, and Muslim Americans, obviously not a monolith, but we've heard from several of them saying if there is no ceasefire, they're not going to vote for Biden. Max Boot, great perspective. Thank you for your time tonight.
Joe Biden is losing not just black voters, but young voters. And some people may say, well, did young voters actually support Joe Biden? They definitely did in Georgia. We know that from the data. How you lose after Donald Trump? How do you lose support from black voters and the younger voters? Going into 2024, it does not look good for Joe Biden. Now, things can always change, but I don't know this time around. And this is no one's fault but Joe Biden. We can say this to Jim Clyburn. This is not the voters' fault. It's not the volunteers that work for the campaigns. It's not their fault. This is all Joe Biden's fault. This is what happens when you do not meet the needs of the American people. And eventually, Black voters sit back and they watch every other group get some type of concession with their vote. So eventually, Black voters are going to say, wait a minute, you need to give us something too. What has Joe Biden done for the Black community since he's been in office? They didn't pass the voters' rights bill. He decided to give the police more money. For all the activists that are calling for reparations, that's not happening under Joe Biden. Joe Biden won't decriminalize marijuana on a federal level. They didn't increase the minimum wage. How is it 2023 and the federal minimum wage is still what, $7.25 an hour? What has he done? Now, I want you to hear something, because I think Teslin Figaro had a really interesting point about what is really happening with Joe Biden. And this is something I think Jim Clyburn needs to hear. He probably already know this anyway, but I want you to hear this. She was on Fox News. Now, Teslin, she's a part of the Breakfast Club. If you guys watch the Breakfast Club, sometimes she's on there. She's not on there every time, but sometimes she's like a guest host on the Breakfast Club. She had a really good, solid point here about Joe Biden that is going to wake a lot of people up. Hopefully, I hope this video of her goes viral, because people need to hear what she's saying, why Joe Biden is doing bad. Listen to this.
Let's bring in Teslin Figaro. She's a former advisor for Bernie Sanders and host of the Straight Shot No Chaser podcast. So how dangerous a position politically is Joe Biden with Democrats?
Yeah, let's be clear. Anytime David Axelrod, who is a known kingmaker in the Democrat Party, is saying the quiet part out loud, there is a problem. Jesse, people have been talking about this behind the scenes for months and years. In fact, I want to remind people that in 2019, it was Joe Biden that signaled to the American people and to Democrats that he would be a one-term president. People forget that. His whole thing was about running one time and being able to be a placeholder for Trump. So what happened is this coalition has been falling off way before this war. Progressives were begged to vote for Joe Biden. Bernie Sanders sat there and said that he would be the most progressive president in our history, which everyone knew was a joke. People said literally held their nose to vote for Joe Biden. Black voters are falling off. Now you have the Muslim and Arab community that is falling off. It is clearly saying we will go against you, which you need Michigan to win, by the way. You have working class voters all over this country. 500,000 people are on strike right now, from nurses, from auto workers, from teachers, from casino workers. That literally says there is a problem. And
let's just pause there for a second, because she goes, spits fire. Let's just pause there just for a second. That part right there, which I think some people did forget about, what Teslin said about Joe Biden saying that he was just going to be a one-term president. How many of you forgot about that? Joe Biden was not in this for the long haul. Joe Biden just basically was to come in and like, look, let me come on in here, do this thing so that Trump doesn't get reelected. And then you guys kind of take it from there. Now, where's the problem? Problem is they have not really been prepping anybody to come up in after that. You can't tell me they're prepping Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris can't get through an interview without saying something ridiculous or stupid. So you can't tell me that's who they must have been prepping. You cannot tell me that. You can't. Some people say Pete Buttigieg. Really? The same guy who did not, win over well with black voters? That guy? Some people say Gavin Newsom. I don't know. Gavin Newsom isn't doing California too well. That guy? Who's next? Who's left? Let's continue. But this is what happens again. This is what happens when you push a candidate that the American people didn't want. Joe Biden was not the most popular Democrat candidate in the 2020 Democrat primary. It was very obvious that Bernie Sanders was. And the DNC and Bernie Sanders himself did everything that they could possible to make it so that it would not be the most popular candidate, that it would be Joe Biden because he's status quo. So this is what we're stuck with. We are stuck with the candidate that did not have a solid base, didn't have a passionate base. Say what you want about Barack Obama. I have many criticisms for Obama, but Barack Obama had a passionate base. People came out to vote for Barack Obama. People didn't come out to vote for Joe Biden. They came out to vote against Donald Trump. And this is what you end up with. Let's continue. Take it back a little bit.
Teachers, from casino workers, that literally says there is a problem. And so when liberals tweet me, my fellow liberals or progressives or whatever you want to call yourself tonight, when you tweet me and say that I'm helping Trump, I came to Fox News to tell you that Joe Biden is helping Trump. I came to tell you that Joe Biden is the campaign manager for Donald Trump if he does not if he continues on this path.
We're going to play this part again. Because this is what they do to you when you criticize the Democratic Party, you criticize Joe Biden. This is what they do to you. They do this to her. They've done this to Bree. They've done it to me. They do it to all of us at RBN. They say that we're helping Donald Trump. Listen to what she says. This is very telling.
Problem. And so when liberals tweet me, my fellow liberals or progressives or whatever you want to call yourself tonight, when you tweet me and say that I'm helping Trump, I came to Fox News to tell you that Joe Biden is helping Trump.
She said that Joe Biden is helping Donald Trump. Now, let me explain to you how that's so. Even though Democrat and Republican politicians bicker with each other when it comes to policies, at the end of the day, both parties are corporate and want to maintain the status quo. Democratic Party doesn't want to go too far to the left, and the Republican Party doesn't want them to go too far to the right for the most part. They want to maintain the status quo. So what that means is this. It means that even though someone like Bernie Sanders was the popular candidate in the Democrat primary for 2020, the Democratic Party would have rather Donald Trump win again than for Bernie Sanders to win. Because Trump maintains the status quo. Trump helped out the corporations. That's what they want. So when she said Joe Biden is helping Donald Trump, just think about this, guys. Think about it. Biden is doing this in an effort to prevent any outside threat, to prevent like an RFK. We're going to talk about RFK tonight. Prevent like an RFK, prevent a Cornel West, prevent any of the other independent candidates, prevent whoever ends up running with the Green Party, prevent them from gaining any type of steam and momentum. Because if Joe Biden is so damn bad, well, then it's kind of like a shoo-in for Trump in that way. And the donor class still wins. See how this works? The establishment still wins, regardless if Biden wins or Donald Trump wins. Let's continue. I thought that was an excellent point.
Tweet me and say that I'm helping Trump. I came to Fox News to tell you that Joe Biden is helping Trump. I came to tell you that Joe Biden is the campaign manager for Donald Trump if he does not if he continues on this path. People want a different choice. You had a former president that was on the stand today, Jesse. That means that it should be a landslide for the Democrat side, for Trump to still be winning overwhelmingly in the polls, to still be winning overwhelmingly across the board. It says it is a problem. Get away from the ego, off the high horse, and give people a better option opposed to telling other candidates that you shouldn't run.
What is the better option?
Donald Trump on trial. That's another good example. Donald Trump is on trial and he is still beating Joe Biden in almost every swing state. This is what happens when you abandon the American people, especially the working class people in this country. This is what happens when you abandon those people. This is crazy. And we continue to see you give billions of dollars to Ukraine, billions of dollars to Israel. I bet you a lot of Americans didn't know how much money we were giving to Israel until this war kicked off, huh? And then you take a step back and you wonder, but you guys can't do anything for people in this country, or you won't do anything for people in this country.
for Democrats besides Biden?
Well, it's damn sure not Joe Biden. I guess we'll never know because they won't allow anybody to win. And I want to be very clear because I know people are going to tweet me, oh, I can't believe you're going on Fox. Well, I have to go on Fox because if I go to the liberal network, they're not going to let you hear it. Your Democrat leaders are not listening to you. Me, myself, organized 300 candidates, operatives, and organizers in Atlanta, Georgia, just last year. Just me, Jesse. Just one woman and a couple of my friends organized candidates from all over the country. There are people who want to run. There are people that need the support. There are people on the local and the state and the federal level that want to raise their hand, but they've been told to sit down, starting with Bernard Sanders, who I used to work for, starting with Senator Warren, who also was a buddy of Bernard Sanders. All of them have been told to sit down and have a seat.
Did you hear what she just said? All of them have been told to sit down and have a seat. So that's another thing I forgot to mention. Teslin did come from the Bernie campaign. I believe she worked with the 2016 Bernie campaign, if I remember correctly. But so she's someone who's been in the thick of it and she understands what is happening here. And this is why I said before, the Democrats would rather lose than to allow someone like Cornel West or like RFK Jr. to win. They would rather just lose and just give it to Donald Trump. They still get to fundraise as long as they get to maintain the status quo. Or they could look at it from this perspective. Look, Joe's doing bad. Let's just go ahead and pretend like we're trying to win this and instead just let it lose. Let it just play itself out. People will get Trump for another 4 years and they'll be so angry with Donald Trump that the Democrat will come back. We'll have a fantastic candidate to run come 2028. And then that candidate will win 2 terms. They like to play. They think it's funny because they think they're playing chess, but they're actually playing checkers because this is starting to backfire on the Democratic Party.
They have sold out their base. Let me be crystal clear. Sold out your base and instead are putting your interests above the people. This is not about Trump. It is a problem on the liberal side. You must have a different option. It's not no more about, well, let's just do lesser of the two evil. Why are people falling off? Why are people striking all over this country? It is an issue. If David Axelrod is saying it, that means it is a problem. It's not just
when we talk about the strikes, and I'll go back just a little bit, what she was just saying, why are people striking all over this country? Let's all remember the labor strike started under Joe Biden's presidency. That's when all those labor strikes started. When we started covering them on the show, like John Deere, the nurses in Worcester, Massachusetts, at St. Vincent's, we covered like, who was another one? Kellogg's that we covered. There's been so many of them, the teacher strikes. All those things started under Joe Biden's presidency.
Over this country. It is an issue. If David Axelrod is saying it, that means it is a problem. It's not just Tesla Figaro, it's David.
You're telling me that Bernie and Warren both won a primary Biden, but the Democrat brass told them to sit down?
I am telling you that every Democrat that wanted to run the same way they told Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Cornel West, Marianne Williamson, Robert F. Kennedy, everybody that raised their hand that said, hey, I'm willing to run, they were told to sit down, and they're sitting down.
Yeah.
You hear that? They were told to sit down. Who picks the politicians in this country? Banks, Wall Street, military industrial complex, and some billionaires. We'll get to that too. They're chosen, they're selected. Notice they didn't tell Barack Obama to sit down. Think about that.
Let's look around. They're sitting down. Nobody is standing up to say, hey, let us have a different option. And remember, again, Joe Biden said he would be a one-term president. So that was his first lie out the gate. He said he would be a one-term president. So Joe Biden, please, if you love the Democrat Party, if you love the people the way that you say you do, you will fall back and allow another candidate to win. And this has nothing to do with Trump. This is what's happening on the left. People do not have the option that they're looking for.
All right, Teslin, thank you so much for joining Fox. We love hearing what you had to say.
Thank you.
Okay. If anybody knows how to get in touch with her, because I don't have contact information for her. So if anybody knows how to get in touch with her, email me and let me know, because I would love to have her on the show, because I think what she said there needs to be, I wish CNN would let her come on. I wish MSNBC would let her come on. I would like to see her on Morning Joe and give Al Sharpton a piece of her mind. Talk to Al Sharpton. Because people need to hear this. People need to hear it. So they tell certain people to sit down. This is what they do. And I believe they've been doing this for quite some time. I'd probably say since after JFK. But you always got to follow the money, right? If you want to see why Jim Clyburn has some of the views that he does, and he says some of the things that he does, check this out. You guys knew that he takes a lot of money from Big Pharma, but did you know? We go back to his most recent campaign, 2022. Check this out. This is the so-called progressive, right? Okay. Look at how much money Jim Clyburn is taking from AIPAC. See, he's another one. He's another one. This is why he won't call for a ceasefire. But he's progressive. Look at this. AIPAC. Number one. Him, Hakeem Jeffries, and Richie Torres. I told you. So this is the Black misleadership class. The Clyburns, the Cory Bookers, the Jasmine Crockett's. These are the Black misleadership class. They are put there to make you believe that Black people have that representation in DC, but they're not. They are working for us. They're not there to work for the Black community. They are there to work for the donorship class. And that's what people have to understand. Jim Clyburn is more likely to support and advocate for the state of Israel than he is for the Black community. So he can miss me with all that. I am progressive. I came out of struggle. He can miss me with all of that. All you got to do is look up their donors, look up their funding, and then you'll understand why they have the positions that they have and why they move the way that they move. That's all you got to do. Now, the Bronx Anti-War Coalition, they're calling all these politicians out. And honestly, I think this is a great idea, and I think more people should do this. We are going to hold all Bronx politicians who support genocide accountable. Here are where Bronx City and state elected stand. Hint, all are complicit with genocide against the Palestinian people. The Bronx stands with Gaza and Palestine. Check this out. Let me go ahead and.
No ceasefire, no votes. No ceasefire, votes. No ceasefire, no votes.
Bronx electeds, your silence and complicity speaks volumes. We know that you are taking money from Israel and AIPAC, and we're going to make sure that those who support genocide do not get our vote. We stand with the people of Gaza and Palestine and against AIPAC. Here is evidence that Richie Torres is an AIPAC puppet who has taken over $141,000 from the Israeli lobby. Here's a picture of him mingling with those committing genocide. He also hid from his constituents in the South Bronx to hold a rally in Riverdale. Here is Dinowitz vacationing on stolen and occupied land in Palestine. No ceasefire, no votes. Here are the electeds on the ballot today and their stance. Diana Ayala, silent. Eric Dinowitz supports genocide. Kevin Riley, silent. Marjorie Velasquez supports genocide. Pirina Sanchez, silent. Oswald Feliz, silent. Althea Stevens, silent.
You guys notice a pattern? Yeah, I mean, they're all people. Most of them are people of color, right? You have the representation, right? But how do they stand on the issues?
Rafael Salamanca supports genocide. Amanda Farias, silent. Here is Velasquez supporting genocide. No ceasefire, no votes. To all those Bronx electeds supporting genocide, we will vote you out of office.
I want to show you something. You see this picture of this guy right here? Okay, they circled Richie Torres, but you see the guy next to him, Adriano Espaillat? This is the same guy that hosted that military recruitment rally with AOC. That's the same person. So there you go.
Supporting genocide, we will vote you out of office.
So that is the Bronx Anti-War Coalition. Great activists there. Follow them on Twitter. They've been confronting their politicians, and what they just did there, it would be great if we had that in every district, right? If someone had a video like that for every district of the politicians and where they stand on this particular issue, that would be awesome. If you have not had a chance to do so, guys, go ahead and smash that like button. That helps me out with the algo. Thank you very much. And Eric, I'm ready for part 2 of Type V and C whenever you're ready. But you guys get the point. The Miss Leadership class. It's all a fraud. All a fraud. A kid says, Sabby, will you be discussing the boycotting of Starbucks? I'll have to do that on Thursday. Big show Thursday, by the way. Thank you on the super chat. Blue Moon Red Wine. Hello, everyone. Bronx Anti-War did another action and video today where they listed all the complicit reps. Please share it at Bronx Anti-War. Thank you. Kid says, damn, those activists are truly dedicated. Yes. Vegan. Oops, I skipped one. I'm sorry. Thank you for the super chat, Skyzer. Who's this almighty lobby that can so easily bribe entire Congress and parliaments around the world? Is this the arms industry? What next then? I'm going to come back to you, Vegan. Thank you. Eric says Clyburn is signaling to the black donor class. That's right. He's not talking to the rest of us. Thank you. None of your business for the super chat. The young won't come out to vote in elections. Based on that poll that I had last time, it seems like a good amount of people said that they were going to stay home. Thank you, Nelson, for the super sticker. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Sabby and Eric T, for your hard work. And thank you, Jay, for the folks who say they don't remember Biden saying he'll be a one-term president. It's okay. I'm sure you remember him saying nothing will fundamentally change. It's essentially the same thing. Wow, that's a good point.